When you think of a hero, what comes to mind? Is it a loved one? Is it a service member or emergency services worker? Is it a civil rights or social activist leader? Does it even include something from real life? For me, it's always been as simple as a superhero. Since the dawn of the Hawk Diesel's time, I've been obsessed with superheroes, idolizing them more than anything tangible in our reality. Before I was even the Hawk Diesel and I was simply in my starting Pokemon phase of the chicken water, I knew that superheroes could hold my attention where other things could not. While people my age were whacking into SpongeBob, my cave boy brain was only privy to shows such as Batman the Animated Series, Justice League, Spider-Man the Animated Series, and the X-Men. You see, my mother thought banning SpongeBob in her household would prevent me from burning up brain cells, but she couldn't have anticipated the depths my mind would go into by allowing me to watch shows about superheroes. I mean, fucking look at me, dude, I'm still a mess and clearly not over them. While I've since graduated from simply fanboying over these shows at a mere surface level, I've since came to the appreciation of how these characters and stories have made me feel. See, as an adult, I've now realized that empathy is the ultimate form of compassion. The key to making me give a shit about anything is being able to speak to me in a way that will warm the frost off my cold exterior walls and allow a passage of light into this decrepit, battle-torn heart. I think that's why I'll always be drawn to characters that are potentially more grounded than most. Characters like Moon Knight, the Punisher, Daredevil, Nightwing, and Batman. Yes, I know Batman is a big superhero and he battles big bads like Darkseid, but in his own comics he's much more grounded in a sense, especially when he's just starting out. Don't get me going though. What I'm getting at is that I like how it's not entirely far-fetched, given these are comic book characters, so take that as you will. But a lot of problems these characters encounter is something I can understand and relate to. Watching Daredevil and the Batman really opened my eyes to the attractiveness of something grounded and semi-tangible in the age of modern superhero movies and shows. Now, to my surprise, in the midst of my longing for Daredevil Born Again or Matt Reeves' The Batman 2, another film graciously slipped back into the forefront of my mind straight out of the cobweb memory codex, a little film called Boy Wonder. Look, before I try to sell you in a random film from 2010, let me just hit you with some stone cold facts and qualities about it that will either sell you on it or maybe make you want to pass on it. A. Grounded in realism. Check. B. Dark and gritty. That's a check. C. It's about a Sigma male hero and his feelings, but is also super likable. Big fat check. D. Cool crime fighting outfit that's literally just a jacket, face paint, a hoodie, and a ball cap. Check. Still with me? Then let's move on. Now I know what you're thinking. Boy Wonder, isn't that the old nickname for Robin? Indeed, it is. The Cape Crusader's partner in crime is often referred to as the Boy Wonder, but the similarities pretty much start and end there with the film. I mean, even the name of Boy Wonder makes you instantly call back to that silver age of comic books. Bright colored outfits, absolute bonker storylines, and corny yet effective lines of dialogue. The name almost sounds jovial at first thought. I believe that was the intention of the writers because any average comic book reader off the street who's familiar with Batman and Robin would see the name and instantly make the association with their OG bare-legged Boy Wonder. Unlike classic Robin, our movie's protagonist Sean Donovan is none of these things. Other than his passion to help people from the evil in his city, the Robin comparisons are pure coincidence from this point on. Stop me if you've heard this before. A young boy loses a loved one, and that sets him on a path of vengeance or justice. Now, don't start giving me the talk of how played out the loss of a loved one is. Save your tumultuous arguments for just a second. Yes, I know it's predictable. Yes, I'd also like to see a different origin. But in 2010, this movie was against all odds. Gems like Iron Man and The Dark Knight had dropped, but the superhero train was just starting to pick up steam. And we were still in this weird era where we had more duds than we had wins. For every Iron Man, Dark Knight, or a Watchman, we had a Green Lantern, a Punisher, Warzone, an X-Men Origins Wolverine, a Fantastic Four. You get the fucking picture. Making flops or assembly line...
Hey. Dear
The Hawk Diesel.
What is the assembly line? The assembly line is a system that's used a lot for mass production in factories. Come on, Moby, I've got an idea.
Flops or assembly line cookie cutter ass movies is deleterious to the genre of the types of movies you're making. It's almost like we're repeating ourselves once again in this modern age of superhero movies. Side note, I like a lot of these films, so don't get ass chat for me appealing to the masses for a quick second. Boy Wonder, in my opinion, didn't even have a chance from the start. Because I'm going to be honest, the trailer screams 2000 superhero movie. For some people, that's enough to deuce out into the night right at this moment, but in 2010, people were even more fed up with this kind of movie. I'll link the trailer to the movie in the description so you can see for yourself later, but trust me when I say it comes off generic. which is a real shame because goddamn does this film have passion. It may not have had the budget of today's superhero movies, but the practical effects and choreography that were used are done so tastefully that I would often forget that this film was independently made with a small budget. The acting is on point as well, and I have no problem with the talent at all, regardless of it still suffering from a few certain lines of late 2000s dialogue. Nevertheless, a semi-realistic approach to a superhero movie in the late 2000s is admirable to say the least, especially a film with the amount of psychological twists that you get throughout the movie. The director, Michael Morrissey, said in an interview that he grew up reading comics and the characters that intrigued him the most were the ones that were constantly on that line of good or evil. Characters that lie in that gray area and are not necessarily a clear-cut black and white character. This theme is apparent throughout this entire movie. At first glance, you would be led to believe that all classic character stereotypes are to be applied here. We have the main protagonist, who you would think is on a path to being a self-righteous vigilante with a campaign for justice, and soon to be lessened in that vengeance is not the answer to his problems, therefore completing his arc. Classic. Then there is the veteran / hotshot cop who is actively investigating the said vigilante and could be interpreted as the true good guy just trying to do the right thing legally. And lastly, we have the father that serves as the main character's true moral compass. The thing is that none of these characters fall into these tropes. They're far too conflicted and complex for me to label them as such. Yes, the setting may be an all too familiar feeling, with our main character Sean experiencing the death of his mother from a carjacker at an early age, thus experiencing a trauma that will consume his life from that point on. But what is different about this film is how he deals with that trauma. The film skips ahead to when Sean is a senior, where he is seen to be an intelligent student. He can fluently speak Chinese as a new learned language and actively works out in an MMA gym. Sounds stoic and on track for a natural badass superhero, doesn't it? Did I forget to mention the part where he also takes steroids to help aid him in achieving better results physically? That is bonkers to me, man. That's honestly a more believable action for a character to do than I would initially think. A small action as such is also a telltale sign for Sean because it tells us the extremes he's willing to go to reach his goals. A big reason I find this movie so special is because Sean deals with this trauma in a way that I perceive to be realistic and grounded, in that he packs on so much into his life that he has no room or time to process trauma properly. At such a young age, you wouldn't even know how to deal with such a thing without outside help, especially as a teenager. Sean, on top of his mother's death, is also experiencing the trauma that his abusive alcoholic father inflicted on him at a young age when he would drunkenly beat Sean's mother. This puts the biggest strain on Sean and his father's relationship because it is hard for Sean to forgive his father, which is apparent in their day-to-day relationship. Although Sean's father has changed his ways and straightened his life out since his wife's passing, the wounds that were caused by him are still fresh to his son. If you ask me, Sean's father could be the true antagonist of the story, or at least a secondary one, regardless of him seeking redemption for his actions, thus breaking the stereotype of the parent being the moral compass as well as breaking the stereotype of being the clear-cut antagonist, because throughout the film you're conflicted with the actions of his past versus present. I'll leave it up to you to watch the movie and then decide if he's a true villain or someone who is capable of redemption. I can't make this decision for you. I believe it's up to interpretation, as it should. Also, the killer of Sean's mother could be perceived as the true antagonist, but I believe the writer's intention was to leave the killer as an afterthought and instead focus on Sean and his inner battle in the present. The killer of Sean's mother is already known as Larry Childs, who has evaded arrest on technicalities for several murders, including Sean's mother. More on that a bit later, though. The way Sean presents himself in the movie constantly shows how much he is still bearing the weight that his past has on him. He pulled off the Pattinson look and demeanor far before we got the Batman. I swear, my boy looks like a walking time bomb throughout the entire movie, which is excellent because his mental health deteriorates the deeper he goes into being a vigilante, until eventually coming to a boil in the end. Once you start adding murder to the list of things you experience, I can't say that's the best thing for someone struggling with mental health. Oh, did I mention that? Yeah, Sean kills criminals. Not fight, not slaps them, kills. Through means of a gun or brass knuckles. Sometimes on the spur of the moment, but mostly premeditated due to the cold, calculated approach Sean takes. Much of his preparation comes from his time doing research in the police station through his connection to the detective that handled his mother's case. Speaking of detectives, let's briefly talk about another character stereotype I'd like to break. This is a much harder stereotype to dispel because for most of the film you're going to believe that Teresa, aka the hotshot cop, is going to be the one to arrest Sean for his actions and then somehow see the perspective of the vigilante at the end and form an alliance with the hero. You know, typical police officer character story arcs. Yet Teresa doesn't really do that. Right up to the end, she tries to catch Sean in the act or compile enough evidence against him to prove that he is the murderous vigilante. She pretty much puts together that Sean is a vigilante right away after having met him in his routine visits to the police station and through their encounters they've had outside of the station. The relationship between Sean and Teresa can be summed up to suspicious of one another. From the get-go, Teresa is suspicious of Sean from him spending time in the police station, and Sean is suspicious of Teresa looking into him, but he is not too surprised because he knows Teresa as the star detective who almost managed to put away his mother's killer, Larry Childs. Albeit in a separate case, Sean also notes that Teresa lost almost everything trying to put away Larry Childs, like custody of her son and going through a nasty divorce. The real rift between Sean and Teresa is rooted in Teresa's belief that the system works and every criminal deserves due process, and Sean, experiencing that due process does not work, causes him to believe Teresa is wrong. Throughout the film, both parties are at ends with one another until the very end, where Teresa has a choice as to charge Sean for his crimes or realize that Sean is a product of his trauma and circumstances, therefore capable of redemption and understanding. I'll let you watch the movie and see what her decision is, but either way, in my opinion, Teresa breaks her police officer stereotype. For a while, I contemplated doing an entire retrospective on the film and going deep into the movie's plot, but I would like for you to experience the movie the way I did, so that it would catch you by surprise and give you a breath of fresh air for the superhero movie genre. A small independent film about the realism behind a teenage hero and the dark places it could take you spoke to me in a way that made me question the validity of what truly makes a hero. The beauty of this movie lies in its ability to make me consider the weight and trauma a character would have to shoulder in his journey to becoming a hero, therefore making Boy Wonder worthy of breaking the 2000s superhero movie stereotype. Now, regardless of what you may perceive to be a hero, I would hope that this film spoke to you in the same way it did for me. If you have no interest in watching this movie but would like to see me break it down completely, let me know down in the comments, as well as any other underrated superhero movies that you think deserve better. Thank you, and I'll catch you in the next one as always.